great lifestyle, right? But it's not always like that. And the reality is, as Sharon Stone once put it, this overnight success took 20 years in the making. So if you think that you're going to have a great life, eventually you will. But to get there, it's going to be really a tough ride, and you have to be mentally prepared for that. And I think one of the questions that came up earlier was, how do you cope in a situation when it's not going your way? How do you cope when things are not right? How do you cope when you don't have the money, and so on and so forth? And the reality is that at that moment in time, you just have to believe in something bigger than yourself. And remember, why did you actually start this journey? What was it that made you come on this journey? And since we're talking about journeys, I can tell you, as I mentioned, there are different types of entrepreneurs. And I've been defined as an accidental entrepreneur. So I didn't really go on to this entrepreneur as people have chosen. I was actually working for a company and I was fired. So I didn't really have a choice in becoming an entrepreneur. But one thing I did realize was at that company, after I was fired, that everything that I had was actually theirs. So my car was actually a company car, so they took it back, right? They took my laptop, they took my mobile phone, they took my medical, they took everything. And I realized that day that I didn't actually have anything of my own. It was actually somebody else's. And the company that fired me, that I had worked for blood, sweat and tears, they said to me, Pervez, it's nothing personal, it's just business.
I can reckon Godfather over here. Yes.
So the point I was trying to make is that it was an accident in the sense that had I not been fired, I'd probably still be in a dead-end job with that company, right? So there are different types of opportunities, and destiny, I think, helps you along the way. Many people say that it's a lot of skill, it's vision, it's empowerment, but there's a lot of element of the word luck in it as well. And luck is quite interesting. A lot of people say, this guy's very lucky, and it's true. But the reality is that why is it that some people are more lucky than others? There has to be some rationale behind that as well. And the reason being is that the only way to be successful is to capitalize on an opportunity. And to capitalize on that opportunity, you have to be prepared. And to be prepared, you have to have the necessary knowledge or skill set or experience to do that. So, just quickly to share the story moving forward. If there's no specific question, we continue the journey.
The floor is yours, sir. Yes,
so, just to share it with you how, and I think Steve Jobs mentioned this, is you join the dots, right? But you can only join them at the end of the journey and look back on your journey. You can't join the dots looking forward into the journey. And what you do as entrepreneurs, people think, by the way, my role today as the co-founder of Team Up, I should mention this, the Team Up is a company which is an incubation acceleration center. We recently worked in collaboration with our partners Mobilink to win the National Incubation Center. So we're building a National Incubation Center based on the Ministry of IT funding, which is over $5 million, by the way, so they have a lot of money. We have a lot of money, so please do reach out to us.
Yes, all the prospective entrepreneurs can, yes?
So in the Twin Cities of Islamabad and Pindi, we're in H9, we're building a 20,000 square foot incubation center. It's being modeled on the international best practices, both in terms of the physical building, as well as the incubation in terms of the curriculum, induction, selection processes, etc. But we're also very desi as well. And I think this is very important to remember that we are not sitting in the US, we're not sitting in Europe, we're not expecting, or if we are expecting, people to invest millions of dollars in us or hundreds of thousands of dollars in us, then we really are in the wrong country. Okay? The reality is that we are in Pakistan, and we have to keep in mind if we really want to be successful. So we would like to invite you on behalf of the National Incubation Center. So if you do have an idea and you think it has an opportunity, come and talk to us. We'll evaluate your idea, we'll work with you, and we'll try to incubate you. In the incubation center, by the way, I would like to take the opportunity. You will get premises, you will get access to technology, you will get access to physical hardware if you require it. You will also be given mentorship, which I think is the most valuable. And the mentors, by the way, are people who have very interestingly done it before. They've been successful in their own businesses, so they bring various disciplines into it. And also, in terms of additional funding if there is required, that funding is available as well. But remember one thing, funding is not going to be the answer to all your prayers. There have been many companies, and I can share with you many names of companies that have actually got funding more than they needed and failed. Okay? And there are other times where I've seen companies with very limited resources and yet they've managed to succeed. So funding, in my view now, is a very small percentage of the success factor. There are many other aspects to the success factor. So coming back to, if you want to be an entrepreneur, and for you to be successful, there is one prerequisite. And that prerequisite, if you have not done it yet, or if you don't go through it, you will never be successful. Agreed. You know what that prerequisite is? Yes. Anybody want to guess?
Believe in yourself.
Okay, that's a good one.
Believe in yourself. What else?
Take the risk.
Take the risk.
Courage.
Courage.
So, do we have any entrepreneurs here, by the way? Wow. We're amongst good company then. I think that the prerequisite to success is failure. You cannot be successful if you have not failed. So now all those entrepreneurs who put their hands up, how many of them failed? Now, is that a coincidence or what? Okay. So for those of you who haven't done it yet, or are too embarrassed to tell us about it, or think you're just going to be successful just like that, it's not going to happen. So if this is your first startup, be prepared to fail. Chances are you will fail. Reality is you will fail. But it's not real failure in the sense. The lessons that are learned in that first startup will help you to improve in your second one, and in your third one, and so on and so forth. So it's not a failure as such if you can learn some lessons from them. Those are the prerequisites. The second thing I would advise is, it's great to look at Silicon Valley and investors, etc., etc. And by the way, I'd like to make a point here that we have, even within Team Up, and also some of the other incubation centers in Pakistan, managed to get investments of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay? So that happens in Pakistan as well. But the reality is, you have to get to that stage. Before that, what happens? As entrepreneurs, you have to see what is it that you can do? What is it that your skill set is? What is it that you have with you? And who do you know? These are the three things that you only have to have to start off your business. And if you have a focus on these three things, you can build a business literally from scratch. My personal, if I may claim to have an expertise, is starting businesses with no money. Okay. Now, most people think you need to have a lot of money. Okay? And while that might seem true, I've built many, many businesses, and all of those businesses have practically started from my bedroom with zero money. Simple laptop, a mobile phone, and you're good to go. So when you come with this philosophy and you go through this process, what will happen? You will fail, and you will learn, and you will improve, and you may fail further, and then you will improve, and eventually you will succeed. So my advice to you is try it out, fail often, and fail fast. Learn from that experience, and then build your next business.
Over to the audience. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open for Mr. Abbasi. Yes, Farhan.
In business we always hear about persevere. You talk about failure. What is the right time when we should be able to identify that we have failed? We should close the doors and start something else, or persevere in case we don't recognize it. It is still the time we should consider it a failure. So what is that time that we should consider our business a failure and close the doors?
Yeah. It's either when the landlord kicks you out of the house, so you haven't paid the rent. Frankly speaking, there is no fixed time as such.
Yes.
Okay? There's often a saying, by the way, that success is around the corner. The problem is you don't know which corner, right? So my view on this is that you should never give up. if you really believe in an idea and you really think that it's going to be successful, you should never give up. By failing, it doesn't mean you give up. And the example is that, again, I will share with you that in certain companies, in certain startups that we've had, they were not successful at that time. But 3 years later or 5 years later, we found those successful, that particular startup now had the right environment to be successful. So what I'm saying is that what you do is work on it and see the results. Now, if you are consistently over a period of time, whether that's, let's say, 3 months, on a daily, weekly basis, how do you feel about the business? Do you feel that you're going in the right direction? Or do you feel that you're not going in the right direction? Consistently. There will be days when you have really great days, right? And there'll be days when you have really bad days.
Can anyone relate to this phenomenon? Of course, yes, we all do.
Right. But consistently over, let's say, a 90-day period, do you feel good about the business? Or do you consistently feel bad about the business? And if you consistently feel bad about the business, maybe you want to take a break. That doesn't mean you stop completely. You take a break, look at something else. Maybe you can come back to it later on.
Okay. Yes? Yes, sir.
My name is Fahad. I won't be able to get anything. I have a small question. You talked about that those Desi interviews. Now, in the current scenario, in the current business environment, perspective and the illusion created by the companies is quite important. But the problem is those Desi entrepreneurs like me, who don't have that fancy office, who don't want to wear that suit. Is it mandatory for that growth? Because I believe that comparing the Iza with Mr. Imtiaz of refreshment, he is minting money. But the problem is that he is not creating a good perspective about his business, that okay, he's not integrated, you would see him making his puris on Sunday. So how important is that the impact of creating an illusion of having a fancy office, a fancy car, a fancy setup, and using those jargons just to impress people out? So what's that? How important is that concept in creating a growth oriented?
Yeah, you mentioned the word problem as well. But before I answer that, I wanted to ask Sadaf, is there any chance of getting a bottle of water? I see over there.
Yes, you can.
And
Sir,
once
please.
you answer that, can I also just answer this?
Yeah, sure. But they say ladies first.
No. That's
very kind of you, sir.
I'd like you to answer that, and then I'd also, I'd like to add in something.
Sir, please.
So just to come back to your question, I'm actually, I call it an honorary Memon. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar with Memon, this is a community typically in Karachi, and they're very sharp business people. They are basically an uta chap hai jisko hum kehte hain, padhe likhe nahi hain, lekin they're the best business people in Pakistan. And I had the honor and privilege of working with them for about 7 years, very, very closely. They were my partners. And I learned more from them than I learned from the multinational companies that I work with in Islamabad. Okay? Islamabad, by the way, I was working in a very nice office, in a very nice company, in a very nice position. And the day I got fired, after a while I went to Karachi in Sadr. I ended up on the streets of Sadr. And the reality is what I thought of Pakistan and what real Pakistan is are totally different. इधर एसी के कमरे में बैठ के अच्छी अच्छी प्रेजेंटेशन बना के अंग्रेजी में बात करके वो मैं ये महसूस होता था कि this is what Pakistan is. But the reality is that's not Pakistan. As many of our friends from abroad they know, Pakistan, वो कहते हैं ना, is a 15-minute drive from Islamabad. And this is by the way a fantasy, because a lot of people, when I talk to them, they come up with this argument to me and they say to me, yeah, we should be able to do this, and I say to them, have you ever really met anybody? वो क्या होता क्या है कि वो इस्लामाबाद में रहते हैं और वो obviously वो अच्छे रेस्टोरेंट में जाते हैं, अच्छी गाड़ी चलाते हैं, आईफोन इस्तेमाल करते हैं, and so on and so forth. So they think the whole world is like this. ठीक है? But the reality is that iPhone penetration in Pakistan is less than 5%. Yeah. So, to answer your question, absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, apart from the Memon, the other case studies that are referenced in Pakistan to be most successful businessmen are Chinyoti. Chinyoti businessmen, again, they have their own successes. And then we have Bodi in Karachi and so on and so forth. So, we were having just a chat. is that what is the yardstick of success? Okay? The yardstick of success, there is no yardstick of success. For some people, it could be money, it could be power, it could be education. And if some of you are familiar with the concept known as rich dad, poor dad, he clearly illustrates this, the two success factors. One of them is a very successful entrepreneur dad, and the other is a school teacher. Now, who would you consider to be successful? So the yardstick is really, really different. I think that Pakistan, like anywhere in the world, by the way, has lots of good and lots of bad. But that's the case anywhere you go in the world, whether you go in the US, whether you go into Europe, you go anywhere. There is a lot of good in Pakistan. And when I talk to some of our friends abroad, they say that, they've actually learned a lot of things from Pakistan. And I'll give you an example. This is a true example, by the way. CEO of one of the mobile network operators who resigned, he was an American gentleman. When I talked to him and I said to him, and he actually made this in his speech, in his farewell speech, he said, the reason why I'm leaving Pakistan is because of Pakistan. मैंने सोचा यार इसके साथ कोई fraud हुआ होगा इसलिए ये जा रहा है. That's the first reaction we get, right? He said the reason why I'm leaving Pakistan is because of Pakistan. I worked in Pakistan for two years, and I realized the value of family. My father, this is him. My father is ailing. I resigned, and I'm going to stay with my father and help him for the rest of his life. Okay? Because he lived and worked in Pakistan, he learned this. So we have nothing to be embarrassed about, my friend. Whether we speak English or don't speak English, how we dress is irrelevant. What is more important is how we feel. And I think that ultimate success, what is success? And we should not forget that as part of our culture and part of our nationality and part of our religious ethos, Allah Ta'ala हमें बताता है कि success क्या है. Success क्या है? कामयाबी वो है. We had this discussion, by the way, earlier today as well. And the answer wasn't given at that time. But I can share with you, Allah Ta'ala जिसने हमें बनाया वो कहता है कामयाबी वो है जिसने जन्नत पाई. With that, ma'am, please.
I was just going to say more or less what he said, that it doesn't really matter. He's done he's achieved what he had to achieve without any of that. Then he's probably more successful than the ones who've actually gotten a degree and put in a lot of money and are wearing fancy suits. So it really doesn't matter. I mean, he's achieved what he's achieved. You've achieved what you wanted to achieve. So how does it affect you? And it shouldn't. And it shouldn't even be an issue. I don't think it should be an issue. I mean, I think he answered it well, and he said it also at the end of it. I feel that should be the last thing that should bother you, or anyone who wants to start. Just when we would let him, and then I'll talk to you about it.
Can we take one more question? Yes, please, Jafar.
I was reading an article today and it said that over 500,000 jobs are affected in Islamabad because of the textile industry being affected and all that. And I'm also running a small manufacturing concern. And what I wanted to ask was that the competition today we face from China and all that for the manufacturing sector or something which we are manufacturing over here in Pakistan, what we are famous for, like the textile sector and all that. So what do you think that the policy should be for entrepreneurs, and what do you see about that?
Yeah, I think textile is of course a very big industry in Pakistan. It's a great industry, but I think there's a problem, and the problem is this: that these industries are family oriented and they are traditional. And if you look at it, they are predominantly run by individuals who are, if I may use the word, mature, older, traditional, old-fashioned, old school, narrow-minded, etc., etc. Majority, no disrespect intended, of course, right? So what has happened is over the years, we've not, and of course we have other issues, governmental issues and power issues and all the rest of it, but the reality is that, and I don't believe these are just excuses. An entrepreneur, he or she finds ways despite the challenges. So as my Memon friends would say, हम पानी की तरह हैं, entrepreneurs जो हैं पानी की तरह हैं, नरम होते हैं. वो जब रास्ता बंद हो जाता है ना, एक रास्ता बंद हो जाता है, तो वो पानी किसी और तरफ चला जाता है. और वो रास्ता जब बंद होता है वो किसी और तरफ चला जाता है, पानी रुकता नहीं, वो अपना रास्ता खुद बनाता है. So to answer your question, I think that it's game over for those people who are in that generation. But there is good news, and the good news I'll share with you is now the generation is in the third generation of these textile families. And what has happened is that these third generation have gone abroad, they have studied in the best schools, and they've come back to Pakistan. And what they've realized is, I don't want to do what my granddad has been doing. It's not like what I want to do, right? So what they've done is they have the financial muscle behind them with their family. They have the education from some of the best business schools. And guess what they're doing?
Integrated children together, modern with traditional, traditional with modern.
Establishing brands now.
Not only the brand side of it, and of course that's the value addition which they're doing, believe it or not, they're opening incubation centers. Fatima Textile, for example, is a classic example of this, where they have invested $280,000 in a startup called Beauty Home, which is a...
It's a lump startup, yes.
Yes. But the people who invested in it actually are from the textile industry.
Yes.
So I'm happy to say that these things are now, and the only way is change. Change is the only constant. And the dinosaurs became extinct because their inability to change the changing environment. And that's why it's important for these textiles to continue what they're doing and add value and add the brands. That's great stuff. But also to take some of their resources and invest it into diversifying their businesses.